Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today for this exciting episode of WINS, or Women in STEM. We are live at Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium in Sarasota, Florida. My name is Dr. Krystan Wilkinson, and I'm a scientist with the Chicago Zoological Society's Sarasota Dolphin Research Program. I also work with the Sharks and Rays Conservation Research Program at Mote. The WINS program is funded by Mote Scientific Foundation and is aimed at highlighting some awesome women scientists, technology experts, engineers, and mathematicians. Because when students see themselves represented in STEM, everyone wins. Today we're going to talk about endangered species and their habitats, and essentially the places they like to hang out. I have a question for you though first. Do you have a favorite place you like to hang out? Feel free to type it in our chat. Wow, I see some really great answers coming through, including a backyard, a tree house, and the beach. Oh, and somebody's favorite place is a park. I think my friend Ross is at his favorite park right now, too. Let's check in with Ross and see what ideas are stemming from his brain. Ross, are you there? Oh no, Ross. What's happening? I thought you were at a park having a good time.
I was supposed to be. I'm just reflecting on all my good times at my favorite park. And now this is the worst topic for today. I just don't know if I can get it together, Krystan.
What's going on, Ross?
Well, I just found out that my favorite park is going to become a parking lot.
Oh
And
no.
I won't have a place to hang out. It's where I love to go. It's like my favorite place to just decompress. And now I have all these wonderful memories. And now I don't even know. I don't even know.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Ross. But a silver lining is that humans are pretty adaptable. I mean, it's not like that we're endangered.
See, I don't know. I'm just feeling so lost. I'm feeling so displaced. But I mean, yeah, I'm really sad. I wouldn't say I'm endangered. I'm sure I'll get over it. It's just a little traumatic right now.
No, not in danger, Ross. Endangered. Some animals are endangered, and the areas that they hang out in are really important to ensure their survival. But thankfully, there are people out there who are helping to protect those species and the areas that they hang out. So maybe you could get involved in helping protect your park.
Oh, I know. I mean, I keep hearing that there's ways to get involved, but I don't even know where to start. It just seems so much bigger than me that how can one little voice make a difference to prevent a park from becoming a parking lot? I just don't know, Krystan. How could I even start?
I think we could use an expert's help. Let's check in with my friend Jasmin. She is an expert at helping to protect endangered species and their habitats. There's a scientific word for you, Ross. Do you know what a habitat is?
I have no idea, but I'd love to see if maybe the viewers know. So let's ask the viewers, what is a habitat? Can you help me figure out what is the correct definition of a habitat? Is it a place where animals like to live? Is it a type of forest? Or is it a name of a group of animals? So we're going to pop up a little chat feature for you, a little polling question. So feel free to let us know in the chat or use the polling feature. Is it 1, 2, or 3? What do we think? Let's see. We're seeing a lot of people say 1, that it's a place to live, which I guess makes sense. That's where an animal would want to hang out. So I guess a park would kind of be my habitat. So let's talk to Jasmin. Jasmin, can you let us know? Let's bring our guest expert in. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you study, and how did you become an endangered species and habitat expert?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmin Graham, and I actually study a species called the small-toothed sawfish. And for those of you who don't know, the small-toothed sawfish looks a little bit like this, and they're a really, really unique-looking animal. They're called a sawfish because of this right here. This looks like a saw. And so someone saw this, and I said, sawfish, that's what I'm going to call this. And sawfish are really cool and really unique. A lot of people think that they are sharks because it kind of looks a little bit sharky, right? But no, they're actually rays. And one way that you can tell that they're rays is because they have their gills. See their little gill slits? Their gills are on the bottom. If they were sharks, their gills would be on the side. Rays have their gills on the bottom. So the sawfish is a type of ray. And I study specifically the small-toothed sawfish, which is a species that we have here in Florida. Now, sawfish are an extremely, extremely endangered group of animals. The small-toothed sawfish is one of 5 different species of sawfish, and it is what we call critically endangered. So on the steps toward extinction, critically endangered is the step right before extinction. So they're in a lot of trouble, and they really need our help. In the United States, we actually used to have 2 species of sawfish. We used to have the large-toothed sawfish. So you can see behind me here, we have the large-toothed sawfish saw. And unfortunately, in the United States, the large-toothed sawfish doesn't exist anymore. It's what we call locally extinct, which means in the United States, in U.S. waters, they don't exist anymore. They still exist other places, and those places are working really hard to try and protect them. But in the United States, the large-toothed sawfish is gone. The small-toothed sawfish is the only sawfish species we have left in the United States. And the small-toothed sawfish is actually in a lot of trouble because the small-toothed sawfish used to be all over the Western Atlantic Ocean. But now they're only found reliably in 2 places, in South Florida and in the Bahamas. And that's what we call a lifeboat population. Because if a ship is sinking and you want to save it, or you want to save people, you put them on a lifeboat. And so these 2 populations are lifeboat populations. So they're the only 2 populations that are really keeping sawfish alive. So we really have to protect them.
So Jasmin, sorry, what's so important about these locations where the sawfish live?
So they live all in South Florida. And when they're babies, they use mangroves. So mangroves are a type of tree, and they grow on the coasts. And the reason why these mangroves are super important for little baby sawfish is that the sawfish can kind of swim up there in their roots, and they can hide. And they can hide from predators. There's also a whole bunch of baby fish that live there that they can eat. There's all sorts of crustaceans. There's lots of food available for them. And so the mom sawfish actually swims up into these mangrove coastlines and they pup. So sawfish are born live. So the sawfish are born, little baby sawfish, and they're right there in a really safe space so they can hide and be protected and get food. And when we take those places away, they don't have a place to hide. They don't have a place to get food, and they have to risk, getting eaten by things like saltwater crocodiles and big sharks and things like that. And so it's really, really important that we protect these places. So what I do for my research is I put little tracking devices on them, and I can tell where they move, where they're spending a lot of time. And so I actually track the adults and the big juveniles. So I'm interested in where they go because we know that the little sawfish, they use the mangroves. But what do the big sawfish use? That's our big question. So I actually track where they move so that I can tell where they're hanging out and what areas are important to them. Because if a sawfish has an area that's super important to them, and we do something to hurt that area, to damage that habitat, or we start fishing a lot in that area, then we're really not helping out the sawfish. And just like Ross's Park, we can damage it and we can take it away. And if they don't have anywhere else to go, then they're going to die. And then we're going to lose the species forever, which would be really, really sad.
Oh man, Jasmin, you're really bumming me out here. This is so depressing. So now I have to go through the trauma of losing my favorite park, and now I'm hearing about all this sawfish habitat loss. So I'm seeing 2 main similarities between my situation and the sawfish. That we both have rostrums. Terrible. And then that we also are losing our favorite place. Now, my favorite place to hang out is about to become a parking lot. But can you tell me what are some of the biggest threats to a sawfish habitat? You say they like to live in mangroves, which are trees. So, I mean, can a mangrove be deforested? Is deforestation or cutting down trees an issue? Or what are some other the big threats to these poor endangered fish?
Yeah, so people do cut down mangroves. So, whenever people come in and they want to build things on the coastline and there are plants there, you got to move them if you want to build something there. So, as people move in and they get further and further out in the coast and they're moving further and further south, they're taking up these areas. Also, because mangroves are plants, they need fresh water. So, although their roots and they're really close to the coast and they're in the ocean a little bit, they still need some freshwater input. And so another way that people are impacting this is that we build things like dams and we change the way our watersheds work. So the flow of fresh water doesn't get to the places that it needs to get to, and the mangroves don't have water, so that they can't survive. So that's a big problem as well. And then we also have big, huge global problems like climate change that's changing the temperature and the acidity of water and all of these other things that are really impacting how mangroves grow. And it's just doing the same thing with seagrass and other types of habitats that sawfish hunt in and forage in. And so really sawfish are getting hit from a lot of different angles. So we're working really hard to figure out a way to protect these areas.
So, Jasmin, earlier you mentioned that fishing activity impact or could impact sawfish too. Is that right?
Yeah, so although no one ever really has ever fished for sawfish on purpose, there is something that happens called bycatch. And bycatch is when fishers go out and they're fishing for something else. Let's say that they want shrimp and they're pulling a big shrimp trawl through the ocean. Well, guess what? Things that aren't shrimp get in the nets too. And we call those bycatch, things that the fishers aren't trying to catch, but they catch accidentally. And for sawfish, a lot of these types of gears, these nets and things, they get entangled in them and they get really wrapped up in them. They're being dragged for a really long amount of time. That puts a lot of strain on their bodies. Sometimes their rostrums break off, which is really important to them because they need it to hunt. And so a lot of times whenever sawfish are caught in these gill nets or shrimp trawl nets, they don't survive. So that's really bad because even though people aren't trying to catch them, they're fishing in areas where they're swimming and they catch them accidentally. And that can lead to them dying. And if there's not that many left of them, we really want to make sure that we're not accidentally killing them. So that's kind of what I do as well. I look at where are sawfish hanging out? Let's protect those areas, but let's also look at how much people are fishing in those areas. Maybe we need to have people fish somewhere else at that time of year. If sawfish are hanging out here at this particular season or this particular time of year, then maybe we should encourage people with our policies and our regulations to fish somewhere else during that time so that they're not accidentally catching sawfish.
So, Jasmin, you sound like you have a very exciting opportunity here to protect a species. What does like a day in the life of Jasmin look like when you're in the field? You said you track these animals. Are you on a boat literally following them around, or do you use different types of technology? Tell us about that.
So we actually go out and we do field surveys. And what a field survey is that we go out on a boat and we fish usually for 5 days at a time. And we use a type of gear called a long line. And that's just what it sounds like. It's a long line with a bunch of hooks. So it has 50 different hooks attached to it. And we put that in the water with bait and we let it sit in the water for an hour. And then we pull it in and we count how many things we catch. So we catch lots of sharks, we catch catfish, we catch stingrays, and then of course we catch sawfish, which is what the goal is. And so when we catch these animals, we tag them and we measure them. So we take on our sawfish several measurements. So we measure the length of their rostrum. So from the tip to where their rostrum meets their face, we take that length. We'll do also their, what we call their pre-caudal length. So this, the tail, is called a caudal fin. So the pre-caudal length is you start from the tip of the rostrum and you go to right before the tail. And then we also take the total length, which is from tip to the tip of the tail. So we take all of these measurements. We also put little tags on them on their dorsal fin, which is kind of like whenever you have a dog or a cat and you put a collar on them, it gives them a number. So if someone catches them again or someone takes a picture of them underwater, we can say, oh, that's one that we've already caught before. And so it actually has a phone number on it. So if someone sees them, they can call. And then it has an identification number on it. We also, just in case that tag falls off, we do another tag called a pit tag, which goes in right below the first dorsal fin here. This is the dorsal fin. It goes in right here. And that's similar to a microchip that you would put in your dog or your cat that actually goes in, like underneath their skin. And someone can scan it and it'll tell them exactly what animal it is with the identification number that matches. So we do that. And then the last thing we do is we flip them over and we make a little tiny incision, a little tiny cut right here. And we put a little transmitter that's about this big, about the size of a pen or a marker. And we put that in and we sew them back up and we release them. And they actually have these little devices in them that will track them for 10 years. It has a 10-year battery life. And anytime they swim next to a receiver, and we have receivers all over the coast of Florida, anytime they swim near a receiver, the receiver hears the little ping that it's making, and it will record, hey, there was a sawfish here. And they were here at February 23rd at 10 a.m. and at 10:02 and at 10:05 and at 10:07. So you can actually see how long they stayed in a location. And then they'll swim off, and then maybe they'll encounter another receiver, and you see, oh, and then they're in this receiver over here at this time. So you can actually track how they're moving. So the receivers actually live down at the bottom of the ocean. We sink them down on some cement blocks, and then we dive down and get them twice a year. We bring them up to the surface, and we connect with Bluetooth, just like your phone. We connect a computer to Bluetooth, and we download all of the data off of it, and then we sync it back down. And so that's how we track them with what we call acoustic tags. And sometimes we use another type of tag called a pop-off satellite tag, which actually goes on their dorsal fin, and it is external to them, so it's on the outside of their body. And after a certain period of time, usually 150 days or so, it is programmed to pop off and float to the surface. And it'll give us all of the data of where they're moving. The cool thing about the satellite tags is that it tracks constantly, but it's estimating. It doesn't actually know exactly where it is, but it's estimating based on light and temperature and depth. And then it pops off and it transmits all of that data to a satellite, so we actually can get a large amount of data without actually recovering the tag, which is super cool. So those are all of the ways that we track sawfish.
This is super cool, Jasmin. Oh my gosh, I am learning so much, and I know our audience is too. So we're going to ask you one last question, but before we ask you our closing questions, I want to throw it out to the audience to start typing in your questions for Jasmin into the chat. I do see that we do have some questions rolling in, which is very exciting, but we like to have our last closing official question, there we go, with Jasmin asking, what are some other careers similar to yours that might not be a sawfish expert, but if you like tracking and tagging and technology and a lot of that field work, what are some other fun career suggestions? And what are just some STEM career advice you can provide in general?
So I'm a marine biologist, so I focus a lot on the biology of animals, but there's a lot of other things you can do. So I actually learned a lot from my geography friends. And so geography is all about tracking things and understanding and the environmental factors and everything like that. So if you're interested in that, and maybe you don't want to track sawfish, but you want to track tornadoes, or you want to track how birds fly and how they migrate, those are things that you can do that are super cool. Another aspect, if you like fishing and doing that kind of work, a lot of people study the fish themselves, like they'll do study their reproduction or study how they grow instead of how they travel and how they move. That's another thing that you can do. If you want to just drive boats, that's also a really cool career. If you're interested in being a boat captain or doing marine operations, we actually have captains that drive our boats for us, and they are really critical to our work. And that's another great way to get involved if you want to just be out in the ocean exploring and helping scientists do their work. That's another job opportunity as well.
Oh, that's so awesome, Jasmin. Thank you so much. And we're seeing some great questions rolling in as well. So we have a wonderful question that says, when you are using the long lines to catch the sawfish, what percentage of the fish that you catch on those long lines are actually the sawfish?
A very small percentage. So sawfish are critically endangered, which means there's not a lot of them. So we do 50 hooks on every line, and we set 2 lines at a time, and we do that 3 times a day for 5 days. So if you do the math on that, that is a lot of hooks. That's 100 times 15. So 1,500 hooks. And in those 5 days, we will catch 1 or maybe 2 sawfish. So it is extremely, extremely rare to catch the sawfish. So a lot of the work we do helps other scientists collect on sharks and other species that we catch. And then we get a sawfish and we're super excited about it. But ultimately, we all collaborate and work together. So we get to take other samples for other people. Well, we'll take genetics from catfish and from sharks, and we'll send it to other researchers that need it. And so we're all working together. So every animal that we catch, we're collecting data from because it'll help somebody. But ultimately, we don't catch a lot of sawfish. So we actually have to spend a lot of effort, a lot of fishing time just to get a couple of sawfish. That's how rare they are.
That is a great question. Thank you so much for that awesome answer. Now, we are starting to run out of time, which is such a bummer. I think the last question we actually have time for to ask Jasmin is, when you're tracking and tagging and inserting and prodding and poking them with all these things, does it hurt them? We have a few guests that are wondering, are they going to be okay after this whole ordeal?
Yes, so sharks and sawfish heal incredibly fast. Incredibly fast. And so we will do this little incision, and you're thinking, okay, well, if someone gave me stitches, it'll take a really long time to heal. For a shark or a sawfish, it's nothing. It'll take them a couple of weeks to heal. We put the sutures in, we sew them up, mostly just because, like, we feel like we want to do that. But honestly, if we didn't do it, it would close up on its own in a couple of days. They heal incredibly quickly. Also, the reason why we put the tags in the dorsal fin is because they don't have any nerves there. So they don't feel anything there. So that's why we put it in the dorsal fin. So we're very careful. We're not, obviously, we don't want to hurt the animals. So we put them in places where the animals aren't going to feel it, or where it's going to be not very disruptive to them. And so we will draw blood, and we'll do the little incision, but they heal incredibly quickly, and they swim off no problem, like nothing happened.
That is so great. Awesome answer. And for all of you folks out there, remember that a shark, a sawfish, all of those skates and rays, none of them have bones. So when Jasmin is tracking and tagging them and clipping their little fins, it's kind of like getting your ear pierced. They're made out of cartilage, just like our ears. So it's kind of a nice way to think about it, that where Jasmin is just going out and giving them satellite tracking tags and all these tracking tags as almost jewelry, right? Now, the last question I think we have time for is, you mentioned that bycatch is a huge issue, and deforestation and habitat loss is a huge issue. Is just boat traffic a big issue? Are people a direct issue? Do they ever get hit by boats? We have a few people worried about boating activity off of Florida.
So sawfish and boat strikes, that's not a huge problem because they're what we call benthic, so they lay on the bottom. So they're not really up by the surface. They're just chilling on the bottom most of the time. But in terms of the noise and the activity scaring them away, that's definitely a problem. One of the big things that the sawfish recovery team pushes is that if you see a sawfish, if you catch a sawfish, if you have any sort of encounter with a sawfish, is to be as little disruptive as possible. So if you're diving or swimming or snorkeling or whatever, paddleboarding, whatever you're doing, and you see a sawfish, give it space. Don't scare it. Because sawfish, we look like giant, scary aliens. And if they're just chilling in a spot, they're there for a reason. That's probably where their food is at, or they have a reason that they're right there. And if you chase them out of that area and they feel like it's not safe for them to go back, they're missing out on whatever was there that they were trying to get. So if that was their hunting spot, or if that's where they were going to mate, or like worst case scenario, they were trying to give birth and they were actually going there to pup, and you scared them away from the place where they were going to pup, then that makes them swim somewhere else, and they drop their pups somewhere that's not safe for the pups.
Oh, so man, we don't want to be
sure that you keep your distance.
That's right. We don't want to be delocating them. That's absolutely right. We want to make sure that their critical habitat stays protected, so then they stay protected. Now, I still see that we have a ton of questions that are still rolling in, but unfortunately, we are out of time, which is such a bummer. However, that doesn't mean that you can't ask Jasmin your questions. Please join us on Flipgrid. Flipgrid is an awesome website that we've partnered with where you can leave us a free video question and we will respond with a personalized video answer. So in case you have any more questions about endangered species or sawfish or critical habitats that you want to ask Jasmin, we are putting the link in the chat now, or you can take a screenshot on your screen right now, and we would love to have you ask Jasmin and stay in touch. So Krystan, what do we like to call our Flipgrid webpage?
We want you to consider us your STEM pen pals.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, speaking of Flipgrid, we actually have some amazing activities on our Flipgrid page as well. So if you go to our WINS Flipgrid page, then you are able to download some interactive worksheets, activities, and you get to hang out with our awesome intern, Allie. Now, Allie is a Mote intern here who is going to be walking you through a super fun activity called Endangered Egg Babies, where you get to pick your favorite endangered species. Now, in case you don't have a favorite endangered species yet, you can go to the IUCN Red List to look up an animal. Now, what we're doing right now is you get to draw your favorite egg baby on your actual egg. Now, this endangered species has to go through lots of different activities. For example, try rolling it down a hill. When it rolls down that hill, that is simulating that it is forced to migrate. It is forced to relocate. Now, another activity that your poor little egg baby could endure is poaching, or as Jasmin mentioned, bycatch. So try pelting it with small little pebbles to see if your egg baby survives that challenge. Now, another way that you could help protect your endangered egg baby is by promoting some conservation efforts. Now, think of an egg drop as that way. Now, Allie's egg unfortunately did not survive this conservation effort, but see if your egg baby could survive a more balanced conservation egg drop effort. And last but not least, another egg baby activity you could consider is any anthropogenic activities, which means human caused. So for example, that boat traffic or deforestation, and you can simulate that through an egg toss. So develop your favorite egg baby, draw it on that little egg, and see if your endangered species survives. Now, Krystan, do we have any final closing words for our wonderful viewers and Jasmin?
Well, thank you so much for helping us today, Jasmin. Ross, do you think you have some ideas of how you can help protect your park? Maybe get involved in your local community and volunteer?
Absolutely. I started way down here, and now I'm feeling so much better. I'm feeling empowered. I now know all the things not to do, which is actually pointing me in the direction of knowing what to do. So by understanding your actions, it's a great way to make a difference. So whether it's volunteering, as Krystan said, or just being aware of what's going on in your community. I wasn't aware the park was even on the endangered species list, right? I didn't even realize that my park was a critical habitat, and now I know. So just asking what's happening in your community is a great first step.
And be sure to check in with us for our next episode, where we talk about how scientists ID animals and are able to use tools to track those animals across international borders. And if you'd like to hang out with Ross and I and see more about what we're up to, check out sarasotadolphin.org and mote.org.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we're going to reference that survey we talked about at the very beginning of today's program, where we would love to hear what you thought of today's episode, what you think about virtual learning in general. We will put that survey right back up on the screen. We'll put it in the chat. And until next time, thank you so much for tuning in to Wins. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.